Welcome back to another episode of the School of Weird. I am joined with one of my dear friends, Carla Johnson, and I am so excited to have her on the show. This has been a long time coming. She's got all kinds of wonderfully weird things that she's into, not the least of which being apparently the love child, if there was a love child, between Frank Lloyd Wright and Lady Gaga. Please welcome Carla Johnson. How are you, Carla?
Hey, my friend, I'm doing great. It's great to be here and be weird together.
Yeah, this is what it's all about. And it's the
Yeah.
holidays, and obviously this is a pre-recording. So once you watch this, it won't be a holiday, or maybe it will be, but it won't be Christmas. It'll probably be President's Day. I don't know. So anyway, so glad that you could finally join. This is such a great opportunity. So I guess before we get kicked off, just give us a little tidbit. You've got one of my favorite about pages, which I didn't know about till this morning. Really need to step up my game, figure out who a love child. I feel like I'm maybe a love child. It would be kind of maybe a gay love child because it would be Willy Wonka and The Great Gatsby or
Oh.
something.
I see both of those in you.
You
I
see it? There
do.
you go. And then if there was some like side piece, it would be Wizard of Oz. Kind of
Yes.
sneak in.
Just having seen Wicked.
That's the love
Yeah,
triangle. They have a child.
that's
It's
totally
me. It's no
Frankie's
big
version.
deal. Yeah,
You
maybe it's
triangulate it there.
yeah,
Yeah.
maybe it's a chocolate factory. Maybe it's a golden brick road. I don't know.
It's like, which Frankie's going to show up today? You're never quite sure.
You really don't know. We even got into the 5-year-old Frankie, but we'll come back to that later. So tell us about you. Like, how did you figure out that Frank Lloyd Wright was your dad and Lady Gaga was your mom?
It was kind of like as a weird person and a creative thinker, it was totally a long and windy and meandering road. And I think the thing, that common thread that was always through there, is people would just look at me and say, "You're so weird. You're just so weird." And I think as
When
a
did that
kid,
start?
yeah, truly as a kid, you talk about like your 5-year old,
Wow.
and truly at 5 years old, I would say things, and I just remember people looking at me saying, "You're so weird." Even adults and kids and classmates, and
Like,
some of
why
it
are
was
you
with
so weird?
parents.
Why can't you be normal,
Yeah.
Carla? Just be
And I
normal.
remember, yeah, I mean, I'll have to say, like, my family's kind of weird. And so they would say that, and I'd think, am I actually weird?
Yeah.
Because I fit in with my family, and I loved my family, and my mom especially. She was a kindergarten and first grade teacher, and she loved to bring out that childlike wonder and encouraged it. And
Oh,
she never.
that's your mom, you said?
That's my mom.
My
Yeah.
mom was the same way. What a gift when when
Yeah.
when the mom is all
Absolutely.
about it, like it hits.
And
That's
she,
awesome.
I mean, she always said, I never want to not be able to climb trees with my grandkids. And she was out, like,
Mm.
always had her hands in the dirt, and she was always doing, and there was never an adventure that she wasn't willing to, drop housework. She was a farm wife, and
Wow.
go and do something, and try something. And I think just growing up like that, and also her dad, my grandfather, immigrated from Denmark. And so there was
Oh,
always also this like sense of wonder and travel and mystery and mystique and
yeah,
curiosity.
and they did the impossible.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And I think that's always been the common thread throughout my childhood. I also grew up in a really small rural town in Nebraska, and I went to a one-room country school. So that's different. Now I go work with Fortune 50 companies, and I say I went to a one-room country school, and what do they say? That's weird. How many people do you run across who do that? And
That's right. And so
Mhm.
all the grades are in one room. That's what that means, right?
Yeah,
For those of
exactly.
those young folks that didn't watch Little House on the Prairie. Okay,
Yeah,
so one
exactly.
room,
Like,
all right.
literally. And when I was in sixth grade, it was just me and my best friend to this day. And there were two fifth graders and a kindergartner who came half a day. And like, that was my school. And then seventh grade, I went to town school, and there was 30 people in my class. And you're the weird one because you came from country, country school. And
Mhm.
I
And
almost,
now everybody wishes they had that. You pay
yeah,
top dollar to get the country school.
exactly, exactly.
Interesting how that
And I
comes full circle.
Yeah, and I think in a way, always kind of being the outsider, but I don't know that I always felt like an outsider. And
Yeah.
I felt welcomed, and in town school once I got over the country school kid thing. And then like through college, I started out as an electrical engineering major, and it was me and 250 men. Like,
Wow.
you're the odd person out there. And I feel like I've had a whole lifetime of being the odd person out, but it was so familiar to me that it didn't bother me and it didn't stop me. And
I
also I have
love
to say,
that.
like, having three older brothers, you learn to fight for your voice, and you learn to fight for what you believe is right. And I think especially with creativity and innovation, you
Because
have
they
to
are relentless. I'm
you
dealing with
have to
that
be
right now with the little
relentless.
girl.
Yeah. And it's kind of like, I played volleyball in high school, and one of the drills that my coach would do is she would just spike volleyballs at you like over and over and over and over, and like you always tried to hit them, and if you missed it, you just got up and you were ready to play again. And I kind of feel like that with the things that I've done in my career. If it didn't
Mm,
turn out, I brushed it off and just got up and looked at what was next. But I think
wow.
especially for creativity and innovation, that's just such a skill you have to have.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because you and I believe in that wholeheartedly, and there's a group called the Outliers. Have you heard of these
No, I
folks?
haven't. No.
I need to introduce you, Scott McGregor. I went on one of their sessions for a talk last year, and what an amazing group! Like you are absolutely an outlier. It's a really cool community. I got to remember to connect y'all because there's just you're a natural outlier. You've become always comfortable with outlier, which fast forward to the work we do now, it's like this crazy value. Whereas when I think that happens a lot of times. Some things that we think are negative as kids, if we're able to keep that and bring it forward, which I call the weird,
Yeah.
it becomes this crazy valuable asset in real world and with adults, especially in corporations and associations and companies and organizations. It's you know it's something that everybody's like, man, how do I get more of that? Right, like and so and now as things are shifting, which we'll drop into in here in a minute, but like as with the new species now unleashed on the earth, obviously AI and where that's taking us, I think more and more the stuff that made you weird or an outlier is coming to the forefront as like maybe this is like the most important thing of all. Like,
Yeah.
because we always think, oh, we gotta get more knowledge because knowledge is power. I need to upskill. It's like, yeah, those are nice. But when all of that is flatlined as it is now, with language models and everything else, it's like knowledge is flat. It's not power
Yeah.
anymore. And so what's left? Like, what is powerful? Like, what is
And
power?
it's an interesting perspective because like I'm the youngest of five. I have a sister and three older brothers. And I'm the only one in my family without 3 degrees. So you talk about that thinking that knowledge is the answer, and they've all been wildly successful in their own career, in their own weirdness, in their own career. Very
Yeah.
left brain careers: military, law, engineering, software engineering, things like that. And they've been able to maintain it. But I think the thing that we forget is when you follow your weird, you have these amazing experiences that when you think about connecting the dots, like the more dots you collect, the more
Yeah.
creative and ability to solve problems.
Collect or
Um,
connect?
yeah.
Did
You
you
know,
say dots you connect or dots you collect?
so if you collect a lot of dots, when you go to be
I
creative
like
or
that.
solve a problem, then you have more dots to connect. And I
Ah,
know
got you.
like you're wildly curious about life and things that go on and
Yeah.
like me and my background, and it's so innate to me. And I think people who they don't consciously collect dots
Yeah.
in order to connect them, but they're just naturally curious and they follow their curiosity, their weirdness, however it shows up for them. And
Yeah.
that's why you can go to people like you and you say like, here's my situation, Frankie, can you just like, can you give me some ideas? And you're like, bam, 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 bam. It's because
Yeah.
you have so many dots to draw on to connect. So you are just a
Yeah.
prolific idea person. So now, yeah, we look at AI and all of our need for ideas hasn't gone away. And AI is going to be amazing for helping us with, efficiency and productivity. But I also believe there's just this incredible opportunity to be the muse with the machine and
Yeah.
have it help us really expand our creative thinking. And we will learn through AI how to ask better questions. And that takes a lot of human thought. And I think the more you have diverse experiences, have collected all of those dots, you're going to be able to ask much more insightful questions, thoughtful questions, rather than just, help me figure this, machine process out so it can be more efficient. We can really move AI into a process that helps us be more strategic, more exploratory, and creative.
Yeah, look, I mean, so with AI, first of all, everyone's AI, even if everybody just uses ChatGPT, which is only one AI, they're all totally different. Like if I ask a question to my chat, and you ask a question to your chat, it's not the same. So it morphs with us like organically the way any relationship would. And I think that that's the part that's so fascinating for me. It's less about, oh, how can AI help me with creativity? It's more about how can AI turn my creativity into reality or my making
Yes.
into reality. And I think that's where the power comes in. It can merge all in between, but yeah, it's efficiencies, but it's also doing things that we just couldn't do. And as we start to, get closer and closer to this general intelligence, which most people are predicting 24 months, and then somehow super intelligence happens within 90 days of general intelligence. So
Wow.
that's quite of an
Yeah.
interesting event horizon. And you hear all kinds of different stuff about AI. And I think most people are just trying to make everybody feel comfortable. But the fact is that like, it's going to get weird quick. And as you know,
Right.
there's two kinds of weird in this world. There's the weird that Shakespeare had with the weird sisters, and the weird that
Yeah.
most people know. That's more of that like outward weird, or like, you're odd. And then there's this other weird. I've talked to you about this, right? With the
No, we haven't,
W.Y.R.D.
yeah, we haven't talked about this.
What?
Oh, wait,
Okay.
wait, I saw it in your TED Talk.
Okay. Yeah. You
Yeah.
probably saw it. So I stumbled onto this. I was already doing Love Your Weird, but because like I was just, I had made this decision as an adult 8 years ago that I'm going to love my weird kid, that
Yeah.
astronaut, cowboy,
Yeah.
inventor, TV preacher that I was at 5. I'm going to just let that out. And that's just going to be who I am all the time, every day. And I'm going to love that because it was
It's who
affecting
you are. Yeah, it's who you
my,
are.
yeah, it was affecting my existence, and I didn't even know it. I thought, oh, this is childish crap, and it gets conditioned out of you because after a while, it's like, yeah, you figure out how to blend in. 'Cause you don't always be called weird or odd. It's like, oh, I don't love that feeling, right? You figured out a way to work with it, but it's not like I necessarily wanted everybody to just know I'm weird. Like I kind of want to fit in, like relationships. Anyway, so I'm doing this Love Your Weird thing, and it was incredible, and I stumbled upon the original spelling and
That's
meaning of weird and was like, holy shit. And it's W.Y.R.D. Most people that tune in already know this, but it's W.Y.R.D. is the spelling. But the meaning was really different as well. And this is where I started to realize, oh, this is big.
this is cool.
And it's the meaning was the power to control or influence your fate, destiny, and my personal favorite, supernatural qualities.
Ah, that's
And
so
so
cool.
that supernatural quality, that's something that the machine never, even with the
Never,
superbugs,
can
will
never.
have because it goes to a soul level at that point,
Yeah.
right? But when you can align yourself and then come together collectively, that's really the superpower of the work I'm doing now is this idea of how do we harness the collective genius of everyone in the organization? And loving your weird is how you do that. Because when you harness that, it becomes this incredibly everlasting power source that creates the fuel needed to fuel the growth loop. And that's the beauty of like how, as I've gone deeper and deeper down the rabbit holes, like, what happened at our companies that made this happen? And what is happening at some of these other companies I work with? At the end of the day, there's this loop that can allow for growth to be continuous, but it's nothing without the power source. Just like with Back to the Future, if I
Yeah.
don't have I got a flux capacitor makes time travel possible. Incredible, right, Doc Brown? But without the 1.21 gigawatts, it's just a
You're
trinket.
not going anywhere. Yeah.
It's a trinket. And that's what I realized about this loop. This loop makes growth continuous, but without the power source. And it's the 1.21 gigawatts is this collective genius unlocked from the people already in the organization. And so weird is like basically WYRD. It's that supernatural quality or genius of each person. And it's part of it is just letting yourself like collect the dots, as you say. Collect the dots. That's great. When did you come up with that? Is that
You
one
know,
of your
it's,
things?
yeah, well, in one of my keynotes I call Rethink Innovation. That was based on my book about how people come up with ideas and to rethink where innovation lies in an organization and actually what it looks like. Because
Yeah.
yeah, I came across this great stat that said 80% of innovation happens outside of a traditional innovation group.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, how do we teach the rest of the 80% of an organization how to be innovative? It's not design thinking, it's not data analytics, it's not all the things that like typical innovation teams use. Really what we need to do is to teach them how to take something that inspires them and understand what's relevant and relatable in their own world and use that to inspire ideas. And
Yeah.
so as I was thinking about that, it's like when I think about the most powerful and effective and like fun teams I've ever been on, it is
Yeah.
people who are wildly diverse. So if we look at how do we connect the dots, then I started to see like the network effect. And the more dots you have, the more dots you collect, then the more you have to connect.
That's incredible. I mean, the collect the dots, because I was hoping I heard you right. You
Yeah.
said collect, because it's so in. I just love like something like that.
So it's one of those things. One of the things
And
that I
it
tell
makes total sense because, like,
it
the
does
fact is, and it's a blessing and a curse, as you know.
totally.
It is a
Totally.
total blessing and a curse because when I'm helping someone else, it's my genius. My
Yes,
genius
and
comes
it
out.
happens like that.
Yes, it's beautiful. They're like, what just happened? Like, this must be like a sign from God. And like, but for
And you're like,
me,
how can you not see it? It's right in front of you.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you've seen me do this parlor trick, but like at Impact 11, I do this thing where I have them put 5 minutes on the clock. I've been doing this, like it's usually at happy hours and stuff like that. It's like, okay, put 5 minutes on the clock, and in 5 minutes or less, I give them their like perfect positioning and everything else. Okay, and it's from millions of collected dots.
Yes.
But the downside is making a decision for yourself sometimes of like,
Yes.
where do I want to go with this? Which I, like everyone else, can't and am not supposed to do that alone. And I think that's one of the powers of like the collaboration piece.
Yeah. Because when
Collaboration
you're
is that
in it.
final component of putting it all together as a collective, and it's supposed to be that way. I'm
Exactly.
not supposed to be able to figure this out alone, which is refreshing because like I think sometimes people think, well, these people help me, but now I want to do it on my own. It's like, why? Why do you want to
And
do it on
it's it's the blind spots we have because of the dots we've collected. It's
your
almost
own?
like our own portfolio of dots makes us blind to what can be there. And I
Yes.
can sit down with a client as well and they'll tell me this. I'm like, here's your answer. I'm like, how do you do that? It's like because we've collected all the dots and we have that outside perspective. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's the beauty of when we collaborate with people. I mean, you're a huge sounding board for me for things because you can just look at it, you know the background, you know things, and your whole portfolio of dots is very different than mine, but where we intersect is where it all comes together and it's just beautiful. Yeah. It's so weird when that happens, Frankie. I'm just gonna say,
Right? And
yeah.
it is weird. That's the
Well,
wonderful thing about it. Wonderfully weird. I was thinking about that. Talking to our wonder friend Natalie Dixon, and there is something about it. I was thinking you sent me a video, and I'm big into turning garages into wonder labs, and you actually did this during the pandemic. Loved the time lapse, incredible. So, like, what was the mentality there? Where you were like, okay, let's practice what we preach, or what made you decide to turn your
yeah.
garage into a wonder lab?
Well, I think one of the things that makes a Wonder Lab super easy is that I married a husband as weird as I am, and as experiment,
Oh,
and
congrats!
he's also like fascinated with garages as workspaces and places to go tinker and try things and that, and he's also not one to let limitations hold him back, especially when it comes to art or creativity or creation. So
Yeah,
during COVID, we're all home, the kids are doing homework, and bored. We felt pent up and like, how do you creatively express yourself? So out in our garage, we have this huge wall that's covered with, shelves and toilet paper that we could find and boxes of macaroni and sugar and flour and all those things. And then like 2 rows of yard tools. Well, my husband said he's looking at it and he said, I think we can do something fun here with the kids. So he takes all that stuff down and we go collect all of our art supplies and he says, kids, there's your canvas. Go make it whatever you want to make it. And then he set up a camera. He's a scrum master. And when he would do hackathons, he would
yeah.
set up the camera and then have it take a picture like every 60 seconds or something like that. I don't remember the cadence for the video that we created, but whenever we went out there to do any artwork on it, and all 5 of us worked on it, he just hit it. And so it was on a cadence of taking a picture. And so we
I
just
love
put
that.
all of those pictures together into a video. And it's like, when you draw the picture and then flip the pages of the book and it
Yeah.
shows this art come out. And it was so fun because we're big fans of street art
Hmm.
and to have our own wall to go do that. And a lot of people would say, well, then what do you do when you're done? Well, you paint over it and you start over. Like
Oh,
there's so
listen, I
many
had
things in
three.
life that can be a beautiful canvas
Yeah,
if we stop putting limitations on ourselves about how things should be. I call that like status quo thinking. That'll
yeah,
never work. We can't do that because, and so that
yeah,
starts
because we never have, and
never
so yeah,
have.
status quo. What a death blow for so many companies, and I've found that I call it stagnation spiral, and status quo is part of that. But at the end of the day, like most people don't identify as like, oh, we're going into obsolescence or we're dying as a company. Where it starts is in this small ways of saying no, when most companies none of that would even if you go back to the origin stories of any great organization, like the founder and the early people in it, like there was zero room for status quo. It was
Exactly.
quite the opposite. And it
Mhm.
was like everything was risk, everything was innovation, everything was passion.
You're
And
scrappy. Let's
yeah,
try
yes,
anything.
exactly. It was like you were hacking and you were rebuilding and you were using ingenuity and I mean, the things that we talk about now to these established organizations that have essentially become caretakers.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things that is the most susceptible to this next wave. Because you and I are very passionate about it. We've figured out, okay, cool, we can use this machine to our advantage. Now we have hundreds of machines and the consciousness of billions of people, and like this is awesome. So for you and I, we're like, yeah, let's go, robots. And I always loved robots. Growing up in the
Yeah.
'80s, like love robots. I got one right here, constantly. Always got a robot. So
There
this
you
was
go. Yep.
advanced stuff. So, but the 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 truth is though is that where the death blow is going to come is that you already have this epidemic of status quo that in part is from the pandemic.
Hmm.
The pandemic did kind of create the perfect storm for what's going to happen next.
I think it
And
like bifurcated people. There were people who said, we've got to figure it out because there's no other chance, no other choice for COVID.
that's right.
And then there's others who said, we're going to hold on for dear life. And
Yep.
if this has worked, we're going to white knuckle it and hold on and grip. And
And they're the ones that are still trying to like maybe go back to the old. And
yeah,
I think that's and I can understand why they would do that, right? Because
mhm,
we've been number one for 50 years, we've been number one for 100 years. So the natural thing would be, okay, cool, let's go back to what we used to do. Let's get back to basics, and then we're going to make this work again. And like that's obviously the ultimate innovator's dilemma, which are read 15 Ways to Sunday and rewritten. So it's one of those things like if you're not honest about this and
yeah.
careful, one of the key things I talk about a lot is denial. It's easy to feel like, well, no, I'm not like them, or that's not going to happen to us, or like this is why, and we're
We're
constantly
different.
spending,
Doesn't
yeah,
apply
we're
to us.
spending our energy just
Different
trying to
market,
convince
different
ourselves and everyone else why we're terminally unique, is what I call it.
terminal. That's great.
Yeah,
Terminal unique.
it
Yeah.
comes up a lot, where it becomes terminal. So I've done, as some work with alcoholics, drug addicts, getting sober myself. I've probably sponsored, I don't know, 300 guys, and I got really close to it. And that's one thing that always pops up is because you work with a guy, and some have died, unfortunately. It's sad, but that's where the terminal part comes in. And that's an extreme case. That's when I started looking at, okay, most people don't identify at bottom in the organizations we're working with. It's like, what's before bottom? And that's this like idea of like stagnation.
Yeah.
And so I
Hmm.
stopped making it so much about like, oh, everybody's going to get left behind and this is the end of the world and it's disruption and breakneck speeds. And I was like, okay, all right, hold on. All right, back it up a bit,
Yeah.
you know?
Because that's hard for people to relate to on a day to day.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Now
Yeah.
I live in that space with
Yeah.
drug addicts and alcoholics, but like, not everybody's a drug addict alcoholic. But the fact is that usually what kills an alcoholic or drug addict is the fact that like they spend all their energy convincing themselves that their story's a little different. Their
Yep.
story is special or it's different. You wouldn't understand. Easy for you to say. And so but it's the same kind of sayings we say.
Same thing. Exact same thing I hear from leaders all the time.
Yep.
All the time. Or they say
Terminally
we're
unique.
trying to
You
make
have to
this
use that.
yeah, we're trying to make this big shift and transformation, but I can't get my team to think differently. Like on a day-to-day basis, they're like, "Yeah, I know it's coming, but for today, this is what I have to get done." And
Yeah.
it's daily denial about yeah, we know, but not yet. I don't have to make that change yet.
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, uniqueness. I mean, we literally just went from one circle to the next. Right? People listening are like, "Wait, I thought you said uniqueness and supernatural qualities are the thing that matter most." They do, but the fact is that if I'm using it as an excuse, that's
Totally.
the difference. That's when it becomes terminal. Is if
It's
I'm
just
using my uniqueness as
justification for not changing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Instead of like using it as like your superpower in the midst of change,
Hmm.
and to drive and catalyze change. That's when the weird becomes a superpower versus a liability, where you
Yeah.
think you're
And
supposed to hide it, get rid
yeah.
of it, tuck it away.
I think there's a lot of organizations that don't want to pursue the weird because they're like, we've got our processes. Like it took us a long time to get here. A lot of
Yes,
paper, a process.
and
And the
bless
last
their
thing
hearts,
we're
they're
going to
right.
do now is mess with that. And I think it's like where the weird comes in a positive way for those situations is, do you need the process to start with? Do you need to do the thing that you created the process to do in the first place?
Right.
And I think that's where the weird comes in is maybe you don't need to do that at all. Maybe you should be doing something completely different. And people get so emotionally connected to the process or to the way things are being
Yeah.
done.
Yeah,
That
because if it
that's
goes good, I tell people all the time, it's like the problem with a lot of these processes and frameworks and everything else is that they work.
they're
And,
good. They're
and
good.
yeah, shit gets better. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
and we're good. Why would we want to? Who wants to be responsible for messing that up? I
Yeah.
think about there's this one shoe. I think it was called Elizabethtown back in the day, and the guy invents that shoe, and he's like, they love him. It's the beginning of the movie, and all of a sudden it does really well. Then it fails, and he gets his exercise bike and he tapes a knife to it because he's like thinking of a creative way to kill himself because he's so I think it's Elizabethtown. It's a great
That's
movie. I
great.
used to
That's great.
always tell my mentor, like, I don't want to be the guy who made that shoe. Uh, and there's a balance to it. Like you don't have to make the shoe. Like there's this in between, and there's a lot of in between.
There's a ton in between.
There's a
And I
lot of
think
in
that's what
between,
we're
and that's the
really
beautiful part about
experiment.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're doing, I think that's what goes back to this. Like if I'm continually doing the little things to like, because it's okay, great. Let's just assume the protocol is great. So the protocol was created for a problem that we had before. If the protocol, if something feels off, maybe the problem has shifted. So we just need to shift the protocol. It doesn't mean we get rid of it. It's this evolution process where I'm constantly going. This is where the loop came from. I'm getting honest about the problem, big or small, of what it is. We're aligning around that problem. Great. Now we're going to move into let's get curious and imagine a new solution that could work. And then let's collaborate and test it. And then the shit that fails from that, let's come back around and get honest about what failed from it. And if you stay in a loop like that, you're always growing. As long as
Absolutely.
you're willing to stay in that loop, and that loop can be a lot bigger. So for larger companies, that loop process might be a lot bigger and might take more time, but you can never stop as a full organization being in a loop.
Well, I think the beautiful thing about your loop is that you can apply it to individuals. It can be your own little loop,
Absolutely.
you know,
That's critical. A
and
key
that's what we
contributor,
forget.
an individual contributor can start their own ground surge. You don't have to wait to see what leadership does.
Yeah, it's like the compound effect from the grassroots level. You
Yes.
know?
And it's not easy. I mean, yeah,
No, it's not.
I thought about this a lot over the years. Is it like, in a perfect utopic world, if all the leaders would just listen to you and I and our other friends,
I know. Look how great the world would be.
I mean, shit, it's like so simple. Like, and did I tell you about the new world of work?
No, tell me
Okay,
about that.
so I've envisioned, when Doc Brown hits his head on the
Yeah,
toilet, the
yeah.
flush capacitor. Okay, for me, I hit my head on the toilet last year, and I saw this thing. It's called the New World of Work, and imagine a collective of thought leaders like ourselves, and we all do different things. Like you might shoot, webs out of your hand or something, and I might have a jetpack, but we're all on the same mission, which essentially is to take this construct, this world. Like let's take America, and the God that America prays to is money, and so
Yep.
the religion is capitalism.
Uh-huh.
And I feel like the gatherings and events that we're called to is maybe it's a new church, I don't know. And but the fact is that we're all called to the same thing. How do we show this world, this capitalistic world, this matrix, this machine, that you can have your KPIs, your OKRs, and all this other stuff without dead bodies behind you?
Yes.
Like, that's
Yes.
essentially, in essence, all of our mission.
Hmm.
And so imagine if you had this collective movement. It's not organized. There's no leader. It's not the next Impact 11. Nobody freak out. But but it's something, and it's there, and I don't know what it's going to be yet. But it's this new thing that we're all on the same path because we're basically all doing the same thing. We have a different superpower, but we're all coming together, and as a collective, we can take Thanos down, if you will.
Yeah.
Okay. And so anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there to you because I have no idea what it is, but for people that I know are part of it, like yourself, like I'm like, all right, let me make sure I mention this to Carla so she knows what I'm talking about. I mention it in almost all of my posts, but nobody really knows what it is
Oh, so, well, one,
because
I'm
it's
a huge,
nothing.
huge Marvel fan, so I
Yeah,
get that 100%
there
huge.
you go.
One of the things when I did my research for my book Rethink Innovation that I did is like we have these preconceived ideas of what an innovator looks like. They're like wacky, they're out there.
Yeah,
It's like either a Steve Jobs or a Bill Gates. Super out there and could see the possibilities, or very methodical, data oriented, KPI kind of thing. Although I
yeah.
mean, Bill Gates is incredibly well read. Um, and so for me, in my experience in looking at teams and watching people come together and how they bring those dots together, I'm like, no, there's more than two of those. So I did research, I pulled, from my own experience and tested some things, and I came up with six different archetypes of innovators. And I see that when teams understand that we need this diversity in the perspectives,
Oh, I love the
that
archetype.
even if you're a super left brain organization, you're still going to be fine as long as you understand the traits that need to happen from these different
Oh
archetypes.
my gosh. Okay, that's crazy you said that because I might need to borrow. I need to borrow that from you because
Absolutely.
I've been trying to figure out if there's archetypes. I was thinking there'd be more than six, but like weird archetypes
Yeah.
where like you've got like this, the teacher, or you've got like the astronaut, or you've got the dancer slash
Yeah.
actress, or you've got the mermaid. If there was archetypes around it, so tell me, okay, I now tell me about these archetypes because I love this. This has got to be really powerful for your audiences.
It's incredible. And so when I do consulting, one of the first things that I do is I say we need to do an assessment of your team. Sometimes company, if it's smaller, I mean, I haven't done this for a 10,000 person company. But we look at like what's the makeup of your team compared to what the benchmark is. And I launched this survey a little over 5 years ago. And it's interesting, with the thousands of people who've taken the assessment, the breakdown has only shifted maybe 1 or 2%, like over time. So
Wow.
so it tells me that I mean, that's your evidence, right? That it's valid. So I looked at like uh how do people bring ideas to the table, share them, and then champion them? And so I came up with six archetypes. Provocateur, that's you and me. Like we're always pushing the status quo. What could be? We're the person in the meetings that the strategists hate because we're always like, oh, and one more thing. And what about this? Like we're the idea people. And then,
Yes. Oh
so
my
that's kind of
gosh, this is all making sense now.
yeah. And then like the strategist, they're like, okay, well, we have the idea now. Let's get a plan and execute it and get it out the door. So if provocateurs and strategists don't understand each other and their innate way to champion and execute ideas, there's a lot of this and a lot of
Mm,
you're too rigid. Like you never look at other possibilities, and you're like you're a flake and you never get things done because we don't understand that. Like
wow.
you're
And
too weird. You're too weird.
provocateur and strategist two of the archetypes?
They're two of them, yeah. And then
Okay.
we have the
They're the most polarized, would you
yeah,
say?
yeah,
Okay.
I would say. Then we have the culture shaper, who's really about they're beautiful at crafting a storyline. How
Mhm.
do we make this idea resonate, and how do we get people excited with the story and have us all come along for the journey? There's people like that. There's a collaborator who are amazing at reaching across silos and building the kind of connections that we need to have those ideas make their way through an organization, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that need to happen. So that's for the psychologist, who's really about empathy. Like how does this idea affect people?
Mm.
How do they feel about it? So kind of back to your point about the KPIs and the OKRs, when that's what drives an organization and people, all the bodies are behind us because that's what drives an organization, there's a huge lack of psychologists being
Mm.
involved in those decisions that are made. And then last are the orchestrators, and the orchestrators are the ones who really understand how to like play the chess game and lead fearlessly. they have those early conversations so little things don't turn into a big things, or little bumps don't turn into huge roadblocks, or all of a sudden we thought we had support but now we don't, we thought we had budget but now we don't. And they're
They
so
keep
good.
rolling.
They're actually the most rare of the six
And
art.
you have an assessment that can tell somebody what they are?
Yeah, absolutely. You go to my homepage, carlajohnson.co.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no M, it's .co for the great state of Colorado where I live. So
There you
you
go.
just, scroll down right.
I think you told me about this.
We've talked about it in Impact
Oh,
11. Josh has
cool.
brought me up
Yeah.
sometimes. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
he's brought you up on a hot seat to talk about it?
Not on hot seat, but he showed it from stage. He's
Does
talked
he?
about
Okay.
talked about
That's
that.
why I knew about it. Man, that is so cool. I
And,
mean,
and so then it takes you to a landing page for your archetype, and then talks about when it's going well, when you're interacting with that archetype, and when you have friction, like why. So it helps. It's a great thing for teams.
what? And do you
Yeah.
sometimes give this to you have the whole organization take the test in advance to kind of get some
Yeah, and so
procedures?
I'm giving a keynote at the end of January to a group of 100 leaders inside a big engineering organization.
Wow.
And that's fun, and that's one of the things they wanted is, and I'm talking about curiosity for that event, is to start off to understand, like, what do they look like? How do they look compared to
And will you talk about, okay, like percentage of the breakdown? Maybe you probably show that, right? This is what your
Yep,
organization looks
yep.
like. And then will you talk about what curiosity looks like for each archetype?
I don't do that because that's not part of the keynote, but I talk about when you struggle with curiosity, here's why, based on the archetype breakdown of you as a leadership organization. And when you have those moments where it feels so good and so easy, here's why. Because even strategists and provocateurs can come together and create amazing things. But it's like, what does it take to get those overlapping circles to align? And when we understand how each of the other archetypes thinks, it's easier for us to do that. And it
And
just
that's
like,
the power
it
of
removes
making
so much.
innovation happen as an organization.
Yeah, and it's very cool. Like when I'll watch sometimes, and I can tell when somebody on a team takes the assessment, because it'll be like click, click, click. Like it was a Friday night and I was working on something, and I watched 24 people from an organization just go through and take it. So I know they took it, texted, and people are curious and they want to know. They want to know how they show up in the world. And I think especially
Yeah.
we wake up and we think
I
there's
want to do
there's
one of
nothing
those so bad.
yeah.
I might have to get you to help me with that.
Yeah,
I
absolutely. I'd be
really want
happy to.
I want a weird assessment. I don't know what it looks like, but one thought I have was that it'd be weird, uh, like a weird score for the organization
Yes, you could
or
absolutely.
something like that. You know, like
Yeah.
which organization's weird score, like 0 to 100. Like how weird are you?
Yeah. I
It's
have an
actually interesting.
I have an innovation quotient assessment that I give if
Is
people
that yeah? So that's like more of like a
that's a
general
different thing.
score.
Yeah, that's like a culture score for an organization, and it's based on 6 different pillars that's much more in depth
When
than
did you start creating these? Are they easier than I think? What the heck? You have like a million
you
of them.
know what? That's a Frank Lloyd Wright Lady Gaga thing. Like working in tandem. So the Lady Gaga goes, like, we have to be able to paint the picture, and we have to be able to paint the picture of what's different and unique, and take out that fear of doing something different, and pull back the people who are so risk averse and want everything proven first. But how do we do that? And the way we do that is help people understand how they think and what holds them back and what their really zone of genius is, that I call it. And then how does that affect the decisions that are made in an organization? So in an organization, it's things like, do you have a core purpose? Do you have values tied to it? Do you have behaviors tied to those values
Hmm.
that drive those purpose? And then do you have a definition of innovation? Because that right there is a huge killer of innovation, because a lot of leaders will say innovation is a core value. They haven't defined it. People don't know what it looks like. They can't perform that action because it's never been identified, and
Yeah,
then
it's like a value. It's basically
yeah,
I think
yeah,
that's one of
that's
the
great
biggest
for
issues with core values at times is like it's a lot of the key contributors feel like, oh, that sounds great or looks great, but it's more aspirational. Making
Yeah,
core
and there's
values into
nothing
reality is a whole different ballgame.
exactly. There's nothing like that. It's grounded in that people can go to work every single day and say, okay, I know if I do this, this is the behavior that my organization and our company as a culture has defined as a thing to do to be innovative. And it could just be something as simple as when you come up with a solution to a problem, look for two more options. It can be as simple as that. And I think that's a big part of why companies who say innovation is a core value and something that's so important to them, why it never gets executed at scale, because they make it so complicated and unattainable.
Interesting. Interesting. And when you say complicated, like the different ways that like they try to put it into make it
It's
a
a McKinsey
disjointed.
chart.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's like a project or
it's
it's a committee. It's not a culture.
yeah, exactly, exactly. And people don't understand how to make innovation a culture. I mean, one of the most telling questions that I give when a company says, "Oh no, we're just fine," and I'm like, "Okay, let me do a one question survey." And I generally they let me do it to a team or a small department. The question is, does my boss support my ideas? Period. That's a single question.
That's it.
You can tell a tremendous amount about an organization from that single question.
Literally yes or no question.
Yes, it's a yes or no question. Yes or no question.
Incredible.
Hmm.
Incredible. I love that. That is
It's
great.
really powerful because one, like, is your
Do you
boss?
ever ask that in with like a Mentimeter or a poll like
I
during your talk?
haven't. That's a great idea. I should do that.
Yeah, I love doing that because I kind of lean into when I'm teeing up Mentimeter and stuff. I lean into the fact that it's anonymous. Like I
Oh
really
yes.
make a big deal about that. I
Uh-huh.
even talk about it sometimes depending on if it's a master class like or virtual. I'll have the my intro to stage include that
Oh, that's
saying
a
that, hey, there's going to be
great
some
idea.
things, and it's different than chat.
Yeah.
And I'll sometimes joke. I'll be like, look, by the time this is super anonymous, I'll know about it later, but I'll be so far down the road. Don't worry about it,
Yeah.
you know. But it's in that anonymous piece, it's like okay, but talk about if you ask that question on a yes or no, that would be really powerful tension
That
in the
would be
room.
powerful tension. And what
And I
typically
love using
uh,
on the spot Mentimeter stuff to like drop into something organic with the group.
and it's what seems to happen, this has been my experience so far, is that the leaders that are more thoughtful, that care about this, generally when I ask them yes or no and do a survey of the group, they will say, I ask them, what do you think your employees said? And their answer is generally lower than what the employees say.
Like they actually think of themselves
They think they
lower.
aren't supporting uh, ideas as much as the employees
That
say they actually are.
that makes sense.
And I think it's because they're thoughtful and they're intentional and they understand there's more that could be done. And I think the leaders that say, "Oh yeah, we've got all the things," and then the employees come in and go, "Nope." They're like they are so clueless. And there's times where it does align, and there's a sense of yeah, this is important to us, and we do believe our employees feel it, and I think that really shows where that connection is there.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. That is such a great one question thing for because I was going to say, hey, what's one thing people could do, but that's a great survey. Before
That
you
right there,
go,
yeah.
what is something? Is there any kind of final takeaway or anything? If somebody is wanting to like take a lot of the stuff we talked about, put it into action, is there like a good starting point? Obviously, we have your assessment, which is on your
Oh yeah,
website. I
yeah.
highly recommend everybody check that out. I'm going to definitely check it out. Um, but is there anything else that you want to leave us with?
I think like it goes back to that Frank Lloyd Wright, Lady Gaga thing. So how do people say like, show me this will work ahead of time? Prove
Mhm.
to me these things work. And I say, okay, if we want data, the simplest thing that you can do to track data that will show you if you're in that stagnation and heading
Yeah.
downward is keep a spreadsheet sheet with 3 columns. And the first column is how many ideas were submitted. The second column was how many ideas were put into like execution.
Experimenting. Yep.
Yep. And the third one is how many were finished, how many made it across the finish line. And that also is incredibly telling, because if you have a lot of ideas that are submitted, but very few go into execution, then you see that people either don't understand what a good idea is, or they have no ability to connect the idea to the business objectives and goals of the organization or team.
And usually it's a mix of both.
Yeah, it can be a mix of
that
both.
Is great.
And so
it's simple, but like profound.
So simple. And then the next one is, okay, how many actually are we experimenting with or trying to execute? Because if you're not getting, and maybe that number is really low because you don't have high quality ideas. And one of the things people say is the ideas are easy, it's execution that's hard. But everybody needs ideas all the way through execution, right? It's not like, oh, we got the idea, we need no more ideas.
Right.
0 ideas.
And that's where the loop comes in, right? You have to be, it's a constantly, you have to have ideas.
It's an idea loop. Yeah. And so if you want better execution or faster execution, you need to look at the quality of the ideas that are coming in. And and as people become more aware of what it looks like and how to come up with high quality ideas that are relevant to an organization, then your ideas may go down and your experimenting and execution may go up. Then you look at how many of them actually made it across the line. 0. You know, why is that? Is that because it wasn't a good idea? It wasn't experience, like you need to tweak the experiment? Is it cultural? Was there too much friction? Was there not, no budget? Was it was there a pandemic and everything went out the window? So it gives you a lot of really smart hints. And so for all the people who say, prove to me it will work first, well, let's look at why things aren't working now. And that is just the most simple thing you can do. You can do it as an individual contributor. You can do it as a team.
Well, that's like that's the inventory. That's it all comes back to like, let's get honest about what's not working. Let's get honest about the problem. Let's just inventory. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. So you get a little bit of data, and then you start digging into the why of the data, and it's amazing what you can learn.
And sometimes it's just that simple.
Yeah. And sometimes
start with getting honest.
Manager of that department who's doesn't want to risk their position and their potential promotion, so they're not going to risk.
Very interesting. All right. Well, I could probably have a whole other podcast on how to solve that thing you just said, but we don't have time for that. But I'm intrigued. I like it. All right. Well, for those of you who've been listening and watching, this has been, another great episode of the School of Weird with Carla Johnson. Google her, ChatGPT her. Go to carlajohnson.co because she's in Colorado, and somebody else probably bought carlajohnson.com. But right? Is that how it happens?
It's for sale for $50,000 right now.
Yeah, so if you get 2 options here, you can go to carlajohnson.co, or there'll be a GoFundMe to raise $50,000 to get the .com.
Help me find myself.
Yeah. I spent some money on mine, but it wasn't that much. But anyway, check her out. She's on there, all the fun stuff. Got some great books. How many books do you have now, Carla?
10.
Oh my God.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out if I got an idea for that 11th, but I'm not sure I'm ready.
Yeah, my mom was impressed. I had 2. Look at you with 10. I'm not telling her that. So anyway, for those of you who've tuned in, thank you so much. This has been another episode of the School of Weird podcast. See you next time.